And I'm very excited to introduce our third final speaker, Kevin Grossman. Kevin Grossman is the Talent Board's president of global programs and responsible for the Candidate Experience Awards and all of the Talent Board's other Talent Board's activities worldwide. He is certified by HCI as a talent acquisition strategist and a human capital strategist. So comes to us with some deep and informed insight. For over 18 years, he has built domain expertise in HR, talent acquisition, and he's a and HR tech, and respected leader in recruiting, candidate experience, of course, and HR and talent acquisition overall. Fun fact about Kevin, he didn't tell me what his daughter's names were, but he did say that they both start with B. So
Beatrice and Bryce.
Beatrice and Bryce. And the fact that they start with B is significant because he refers to them as the beehive. For those of you who like parenting stories, I don't know if they're funny or cute or maybe horrible.
all of the above.
All of the above.
All of the above.
You can check out Kevin's Instagram where he posted the hashtag beehive power. I have a feeling that your daughters are going somewhere.
Yes, you're going to. Some of you are going to hire them someday too. Right? I'm telling you right now.
He has resumes.
I don't know if I'm going to need that, but you can. Am I projecting fine? I kind of got that booming voice.
So turn it over.
Oh, we good? Did I interrupt you?
No, I was just going to say what you were going to talk about.
Oh, say it. Say it. Tell them.
Non-traditional.
That's that. Am I hearing? So yes, and I got to tell you a funny story. So last night, after I got here and was hanging out with some of the folks that were at the event today with the college recruiter folks, I went and FaceTimed my kids. And I just live in Santa Cruz, not that far away, but I miss them. So we're FaceTiming them. And so my youngest is saying, starting to tell the story, Daddy, it's embarrassing if you're with a group of people and you fart. And I said, okay. My wife and I were like, well, I don't know where that came from. That's great. I'm like, thank you, sweetie. That's very informative. And she's like, so when you're at your meeting tomorrow, don't fart. I don't know where that comes from. No. But you still will hire her someday.
Did you follow her advice?
So far, so good.
Yeah.
Now I'm on. So, and you're filming me too. So there you go.
With audio.
Welcome, everybody. Hi, thanks for hanging in there. I know after lunch it's always tough to have another session, and especially with somebody who's going to share some data slides in 9-point font. So I'll get to those later. But not 750 of them, only a handful, I promise, right? But the first thing I've got, because I got to keep the theme going, right? So this is my wife and I at Halloween, and my sister-in-law. These are the non-traditional Jedi apprentices. Right? Anyway, thought I'd keep the Star Wars since it's Star Wars Day today. And of course, we want to thank again Intuit, Shaker, and College Recruiter for having this event today. It's been a pretty informative day so far for everybody. Yeah. Good. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit about non-traditional student hiring and some traditional as well. And we're really going to kind of round out this day with everything else we've been discussing. And I'm going to share some candidate experience research. That's what my research organization does as it relates to this. And one of the things I want you to think about throughout this next 15 minutes that I'm presenting, and then when I have my panel come up as well and talk, is we're all professional candidates at any given time. All right, all of us, even though we're gainfully employed, we like what we do. There could be an opportunity that turns our head. We could get downsized, lose our jobs, might have to be forced to find another position. At any given time, we're candidates. So I want you to think of everything that you've learned today and what we're going to be talking about next through the lens of what it's like to be a candidate, a job seeker, regardless whether you're a non-traditional or traditional candidate. And everything that you do in recruitment and talent acquisition impacts that journey, and whether or not at the end of the day, they're going to apply again with you, refer others, or buy your stuff if and when applicable. That make sense? Okay. So first, some kind of just a definition. I don't have to probably define this for all of you, but this is some of this stuff is new to me. It's not something that I dig into every single day when it comes to college recruitment. We've got some data that I'm going to share that does focus on that aspect of college recruiting. So but here's some definition of what a non-traditional student is, what we're talking about today. Somebody who's usually older, above 25 years old. Somebody who is probably only going to school part-time. They're working full-time. Maybe they have dependents. Maybe they don't. And or they don't have a traditional high school diploma. Does this definition jive with most of you? Does anybody have anything that they would add to that? You want me to leave that up for you? Oh, well, you were going to take a picture there. I just want to make sure.
I did already. Online students.
Veterans.
Yes. Okay. Veteran and online students. Which I'm going to touch on a little bit. So, how many of you would consider yourself or were a non-traditional student? Raise your hand. Because I was too. So we're part of the same club. So I'm a proud San Jose State alum, Spartan. You know, not too far away from here in downtown San Jose. San Jose State, we like to say it powers Silicon Valley, and it does. There's a lot of folks that come from San Jose State that are working in Silicon Valley today. But, we kind of take a back seat to Stanford and to Berkeley when it comes to Bay Area colleges, right? But I was a non-traditional student. Although I did go full-time when I finished school, I also worked full-time and about killed myself. But I did it, put myself through school, had a little bit of a student loan debt, not the inordinate amount that a lot of students can have today, unfortunately. But when I was I didn't know this stat, that 3/4 of undergraduates are non-traditional. That's a lot. I didn't realize it was that many folks that are going to school today. Has anybody else read that before or seen that stat? Okay. There's also something else that's kind of differentiating when it comes to the world of education and is that a light?
Stranger Things.
There you go, right? My girls are channeling through me right now. I know, it's fine.
It's so that we can see the monitors
Yeah,
better on the live stream.
So online education has increased, especially online college, right? And on-campus enrollment is decreased. That tends to be an offsetting that's going on right now. It's no surprise. Technology, across industries, has been disrupting education for a while now, for a few years. So we're seeing a rise of the online students as well, whether a traditional campus or a traditional college or university is offering online courses, and or it's just purely an online accredited university or college as well. And I thought it was also fascinating to hear some of the other examples earlier today, like the whole DeVry's, the whole statistic that you brought up about the DeVry's College, and most African American computer science degrees come from DeVry's.
Places next to Maryland, yes.
That's why that's amazing to me. So there's a complexity today when it comes to college recruitment, traditional students, non-traditional students, and where they're getting their degrees, where they're getting their education, more so than we've ever seen. Some other things that are complicating the matter too, you've got this idea of degree inflation, where you've got a lot of organizations who are really hyper-focused on, I need somebody who has that 2 and 4 year degree. And yet there's a lot of middle skill folks, and maybe not so much in Silicon Valley, but maybe in other rural areas or other areas around North America, they're losing out on jobs because they don't have that degree, and yet they have the skills of actually being able to perform that job overall. So that's something that I was reading about. Also, one of my panelists, who I'll introduce in a bit, who's from EY, but she's part of the Big Four, they've also started to they still require degrees in most of their positions, but they're not comparing academic scores and where individuals went to school. It's more about their skill set, their background, and their potential in particular jobs. And she can talk to that more when we do the panel discussion too. So that's kind of a change of how we're looking at traditional college degrees and students as well. And then there's also the skills gap. There's a lot of alternative education channels that are available today, of where you can get skilled up in learning more technical skills that college and universities are going to provide. There's a lot of programs and we were just talking about this. Speaking of kind of following the lead of the STEM skills and girls, there's Girls Who Code. That's an organization. There's Girls Inc. There's another organization that I did a podcast with recently called Venture Lab, where it's more about entrepreneurial skills and innovation and thought leadership. Focused more on girls, but also for boys. So there's a lot of different channels and availability, but it's quite a rich tapestry of what's available for individuals that aren't doing through the 2 and 4 year traditional degree. And then we've also got to consider student loan debt, right? That's top of mind for a lot of students today, like where I'm going to go in my career path, because I got this whole thing dragging behind me right now that I got to take care of, as well as the contingent workforce, right? That's been on the rise. The gig economy that we've called a lot of different things, but there are organizations that have, for a variety of business reasons, are wanting to go more into the contract work, depending on the kind of position. Save some money on benefits. And then there's also individuals out of necessity and or by choice that want to do only contract gig work and project work. And so there's a rise of the contingent workforce. What I'm excited about is that I see a lot more conversations now between procurement in an organization, maybe, and you can tell me if this is the case with your organizations, and HR and recruiting for more of that total talent approach to recruiting, to be able to say, listen, I've got these contractors here. These individuals have got some really good skills for those full-time roles over here that you want to hire, and vice versa, right? Individuals that want to go from full-time, maybe they want to go to contract work. Is that something that some of your organizations are having more of those conversations? That's good. Good. So when we look at a lot of the different solutions, this is some of the talent board data now based on the employer survey side of our research, asking employers what kinds of systems that they have, what they're utilizing when it comes to just overall recruitment today. Most organizations, and this has been creeping up closer to 100% every year in our research, have an ATS, right? A good portion of organizations are utilizing some form of college university programs in the recruitment. A good portion, over 70%, have some kind of candidate relationship management software, whether it's part of their ATS, the standalone point solution. How many of you use your CRM for recruiting, for like promoting jobs, content? Anybody do any of that? Is it part of your ATS?
We're in between.
Kind of in between? What does that mean?
We're in between systems.
What do you do? Wait, you're going to
Going from Taleo
to iSIMS.
But so right now CRM is Excel.
Got it. But the iSIMS is gonna bring you home in that.
Yeah,
regard.
but we have a condensed community list. So a sourcer has a condensed community list. So it's not like PD has one, sales has one, right? So
Got
we have one master condensed community list.
Got it.
But yeah, no, it's not ideal. Let me be very clear.
But you're gonna be in good hands though where you're going.
Oh yeah, a year from now,
I
I've
know.
been saying this for 3 years, my team will hate me, but yes.
But you gotta go through
A year from now, it's so
the
much
pain of the switch though. That's
Yeah.
another conversation for another time.
I'm hoping.
Absolutely. So and also 70% of employers tell us that they also have some form of community talent network system that could be their ATS, it could be a CRM, it could be another point solution that they're leveraging. It could be a very specific college recruiting platform called College Recruiter, right? Where you're joining, getting new hires and graduates connected with careers and opportunities. Are my girls calling?
Sorry.
Is that what's going on right now? Is the beehive calling? Checking in on me? All right. Let's keep going. And then employers are also telling us through the research that over 50% have university college level intern co-op programs that they feel are critical and differentiating in their recruitment. 39% of them are feeling that these campus information sessions are also very important and critical. And then about a third are saying just an overall kind of general career fairs are really important still to them in their recruiting efforts. Okay. So now I'm going to share some of that 9-point font data. How's that sound? But I got a fun, quick little quiz as I continue to move through this. Based on our research, we do a lot of Likert scales, 1 to 5 ratings. Okay, we ask the candidates how they would rate their experience with the employers across the board from pre-application to onboarding. When we do look at the overall rating and we divide it by generation, because we don't ask for age in our research, they have them associate with generation. All right. So who do you think, by a show of hands, thinks has the better candidate experience overall? Do you think older candidates have a better candidate experience? Raise your hand. Who thinks younger candidates have a better candidate experience? Yeah, a little bit tip the scales that way. And according to our data and our research, it's the younger candidates by about 12% difference overall. And the year before it was a little bit higher, about 16% difference. So their rating overall, their overall average rating, and this is across the board with most of the ratings, younger candidates tend to have. Now there's a lot of reasons for that, a lot of stuff going on under the hood, but let's keep moving on. When it comes to internship and co-op programs, employers are finding, question? Yeah, got it. Thank you. I'm moving through it. The employers are saying that 40%, 42% of them, it is a big part of their recruitment effort is to have these internships and co-op programs. And then 14% say they're absolutely strategic. So a good portion of organizations today really do focus in on the internship and the co-op programs for the recruitment. And when it comes to, I'm actually gonna, just because of time, because I gotta get to my money shot, I'm gonna skip a couple of things. If that's all right. Everybody all right? You gonna forgive me for that?
Yeah.
I always have so much data, no matter how much I whittle it back, trying to cram it into 20 minutes. Are they gonna get copies of this? No? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, good. We can share.
Real quick on this one, we asked the employers what are the educational career initiatives that they're focused on, not only in the college, but also even going to trade school, high school, and even grade school. And you can see the distribution of a lot of the employers. They're offering a lot of these programs, but unfortunately, the awareness on the candidate side is pretty low, actually, overall, when you look across the board, even for university and college career initiative programs. You might have a higher awareness in your organizations today, but this is, again, this is the 200 employers from North America that gave us this. To me, that should be, there's some work to be done there in regards to getting that awareness up to your students today. And most valuable research channels, this is just comparing the college-focused ones, and I kind of went across generation. That you can see with Gen Z, all of these are much more important probably because they're also more top of mind on the traditional student side versus non-traditional, but it gives you a little bit of a breakdown there. Now some employer examples. I'm not going to read through these verbatim, but I went out to some of our network that participate in our research as well as those who win our Candidate Experience Awards. Humana has a variety of internship programs and virtual job experiences that they offer to many students, both non-traditional and traditional as well, and including veterans and wounded warriors, as you mentioned earlier, Stephen, programs that they offer. And the same thing with Superior Group. This is a workforce outsourcing organization, and they have what they call an Exceed program, which is another way to get individuals into their workforce, get them trained for leadership skills, sales and marketing skills. There's a variety of these. I'm sure, I know some of you were going to touch on this in the panel discussion. EY has Empower You, which is their own postgraduate Women Professional Development Day that I know that Angela's going to talk about when we get to the panel discussion. But there's a lot of different programs, a myriad of them that are available. There's even some more examples that come from our research. Some of these are anonymized, and I know it's a lot of copy, but you'll have copies of this. But just different examples, whether it's a technology firm, whether it's healthcare, whether it's even a trade school focus, a lot of different programs that are being more inclusive of the non-traditional student in their recruitment programs. And then LinkedIn, Anna, you pointed that out to me. LinkedIn's apprentice program, we brought that up earlier, that those apprentice programs are coming back, especially in technology. And LinkedIn has their 6-month apprenticeship program working on getting full-time software engineers as well. So the last thing I'm going to touch on, and then we're going to jump to the panel, all right, is the business impact. Everything that I talked about today, everything that you do, any of these programs that are going to help you target non-traditional, traditional, whoever that market is for your organizations today, everything you do impacts potentially the business. So this is a quick look at the overall, the rating of the overall rating of general population versus those who are aware of a career educational program, a college educational program at this particular employer. So, for example, So this is looking at, we asked the candidates, how likely are you to refer based on your experience working at that organization, right? So this is comparing those, the general population, they're 30% of the time they're saying they're going to be extremely likely to refer others. Those who are aware of a career program when they were going through that process, it's a little bit higher. It's about 10% higher on the average of the over extremely likely rating. When we look at all of the companies that participated in North America this year, all the candidate responses, those individuals who have an overall one-star crummy time going through the employer process, 44% of them say they will never ever refer anybody. 82% on the 5-star rating side said that they will refer 82% of the time. That's a huge difference. And then lastly, on the business impact, we look at all of the candidates that responded this year in North America. Those who have a 1-star crummy time say 46% of the time they will sever the business relationship with your organizations. They won't apply again, they won't refer, they won't buy stuff even when applicable. Those who have a great overall candidate experience, 74% of the time will increase the business relationship with organizations today. Just kind of wanted to hit on that candidate experience data at the end. So now what I want to do, let's segue right to the panel. Anna, yeah, is that fine? Okay. See, I didn't make you bleed. I didn't make your eyes bleed, right? with all my data. So let's have Angela, Mona, and Glenn come on up. Come on to the hot seat. And then up. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. That's like going through all my data. Thanks so much for being generous. Appreciate it. My girls would be proud. All right. So before first, let me have them each introduce themselves, and then we can see if there's any questions first. And then I've got a whole bunch of questions to ask you. Sound good? So let's start with Mona. Introduce yourself, a little bit about what you do, and then we'll go on.
Got it. I'm Mona Tawakali. I'm the VP of Digital Strategy for KRT Marketing. We're a recruitment advertising firm based here in the East Bay. I lead the performance marketing team. So we work with a lot of large employers to help them figure out more on the tactical side. How do we get in front of these very specific audience groups? How do we do it efficiently? How do we measure the data and understand? How do we apply that to future buying models? And so I'm really more on the tactical side and high-level strategy, data analysis as well.
Excellent. Angela.
Hi, everyone. I'm Angela Sabrowski, and I'm an Associate Director and MBA Recruiter with EY. I've been with the firm for 16 years, and for the last 10, I've been primarily focused on MBA recruiting. And I also run special programs for our graduate recruiting team, like our Empower You Women's Leadership Conference and other branding initiatives nationally for our graduate MBA recruiting team.
Excellent. Thank you. And Glenn.
I'm Glenn Fowler. I manage recruiting and training for the California State Auditor's Office, and I'm also serving as the current president for NACE. I've been in the recruiting space for about 18 years now.
Excellent. So, thank you. Thank you. There they are. So, any questions about either the content that I shared and or anything for the panel? I've got one to kick us off if nobody has one, but you let me know. Anybody got a question? Yes, sir.
I hear a lot of times, and Kevin, you mentioned it, talking about like candidate experience and how it influences, sales of the organization. Candidly, do HR people actually care about that? I know they'll say they do, but does it actually change their behavior? Oh, if I treat this candidate like a jerk, we might lose a sale.
Anybody want to answer first? Go ahead.
We were just having a conversation, actually. This is like the perfect question to kick us off. We were just talking over lunch about how at EY, really over the last 3-4 years, we have been very focused on the candidate experience. That is something that's extremely important to us. We treat recruiting like we treat our clients. And so my clients as a recruiter are my candidates and the practices that I support and the schools that I recruit from. And we have a team structure in place, very much run it like an engagement team, where people have responsibilities they have to fulfill. But more importantly, for us, it is whether these individuals come to EY or they go anywhere else, they're going to remember their experience with us. And so just like we talk about the customer experience, we treat our candidate experience the same. So we were talking about simple things like following up with every candidate with a personal phone call after they don't make it through first round or second round interviews, and giving them some feedback and keeping in touch with them along the way. And, where did you end up? And can I be a resource for you? Those little things go a long way. We've been, so USC, I'll give you an example because that's the school I lead recruiting at. For the last 3 years, we're the employer of choice. And a lot of that has to do with the investment that our team has made. A lot of our alums, of course, the Trojan Network is very strong. So you have a lot of alums that come back and provide guidance and coaching to those students. But it really is important because even for those candidates that don't accept offers with us or don't receive an offer, they're still a brand ambassador for us on campus. And they're going to go on, eventually they might want to re-recruit. In fact, I just had a candidate who spent 9 months at a competitor, and he called me and said, it's not for me, and he's rejoining us in January.
Oh, sorry, no, finish your thought. I was gonna add another example from a completely different industry. I work with Chipotle, and they get millions of applicants every single year to make about 100,000 hires. And so when you think about the impact of a poor candidate experience across 1 million applicants, that can have a huge impact on the business, because if they have a bad taste in their mouth about how they were treated, they're likely not going to, no pun intended,
Well said.
not going
Well
to come back and really feel enthusiastic about being a consumer. But if you think about creating a positive experience, even if you don't choose that candidate for the role, maybe saying, hey, it wasn't a right fit right now, but you know what? Here's a burrito on me, for example. They may feel really good about the brand, and that has positive impact, for the business. That is something that you can measure when you think about candidates of that scale.
Glenn.
And just building on that as well, so let's talk about attracting talent. That's what we're trying to do here. So it is the face of your organization. It's their first experience. And if it feels clunky and antiquated, and again, even though they may continue through that process, it's certainly a reflection of your company culture and what that experience is the key word here today, it's going to feel like for them working for you. And you've got to be mindful of that on the front end. So look at your processes. And do we have things like gamification or online assessments that they can take 24/7? Are you mobile yet? Can a candidate apply via mobile, like a phone? So 45% of the candidates are saying that they can. It's with NACE data that they've applied through mobile. So you have to look at your, can they do that? Is it simple? It shouldn't be long, I think, as they were talking about the gamification session. And then the timeliness, I like that you're hitting on that too, right? How do they feel like they're being treated? Are they just left out there for, weeks on end, wondering where they stand, or is there enough touch along the way? So anyways, I think it's an important,
Absolutely.
very important piece.
To kind of underscore, Stephen, what you were just asking is more consumer-based businesses than B2B companies, but those that participated in our research, airlines, hospitality, mobile ride providers, the list goes on. They have started to quantify this, and it's potentially millions of dollars a year based on, and because their candidates are their customers are their candidates, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, on B2B side, it's not as easy to connect those dots, but the fact of the matter is that if you lose 5% of your referrals that you would have had otherwise, you don't have those people that you would have otherwise hired to grow and sustain the business. It's harder to make that case. But there are companies that participate in our research, and those that even don't, that are trying to connect those dots together. What's the cost, the resentment cost to our bottom line, to our referral networks? So the reality is there of potential. There's a great case study online. It's not part of our research, but Virgin Media. You can do a search on Virgin Media candidate experience, and it was a documented case study from about 1.5 years ago that they basically figured out they were losing $6 million a year based on poor candidate experiences, and then they turned it around and turned it into a $7 million revenue stream. You can read that case study online. So the reality is there when it comes to how we're treating, and we're not even talking about making everybody, handing a balloon to every single candidate and making them happy and saying, thank you for your time, because that's never going to happen. The reality is just that It's the perceived fairness, the setting expectations, what are the next steps, and give me closure when you're done pursuing me. And be fair about the process. That's what's key. That's what wins at the end of the day. Anybody else have a question? Either related to that, or we can go on to another topic. So let me bring it back then, and let's start, Angela, with you, since you are responsible for MBA hiring, right, at EY. What are the key challenges today when it comes to scaling traditional and even non-traditional students? And is it going to vary by job type and skills? But talk more from your experience on the MBA side. What are the challenges today?
So one thing that I have seen in the 10 years that I've been doing MBA recruiting for the firm is there's been about a 40% increase in us hiring the part-time MBA student. So I would say that maybe falls into that non-traditional category, right? These are students that are still employed. They're going through their MBA program. It's taking them 3 years to do that. And in the beginning, when we started really getting back into the MBA recruiting space, when we rebuilt our consulting services, we were not focused on those candidates because I think there was this stigma of, we need the 2-year full-time MBA, the person who quit their job, they're going to get their MBA, and now they're out there recruiting. And there was also, on the career services side, not a lot of support for the part-timers because a lot of them were getting their education funded by their employer, and there was a conflict of interest. They didn't want to support these students going through a recruiting process if their company was paying for their education at that university. They didn't want those companies to pull out. So that was a reason, I think, in the beginning. That has changed dramatically. And like I said, about 40% more of our hiring now, or we've seen that increase about 40%. I'll give, again, USC is my school, so I can give you some data there. Out of the 10 offers we made just recently, and our volume is very small. MBA recruiting is not on the same scale as undergrad. 8 out of 10 came from the part-time program.
Wow.
And all of them accepted. So, and they are very desirable because they have really strong, relevant professional experience, and they're still, through their program, applying what they're learning in the classroom in their careers, and they're able to demonstrate that through the interview process.
Excellent. Glenn, what's your take?
Well, the key here is experience. So seems to be the word of the day here. But it's funny because the NACE data totally supports this as well. So in the employer recruiting benchmark survey, 61% of the employers reported that their hires had some kind of prior experience. So it's hand in hand. And then similarly in the NACE first destination survey, so where the students landed a position, they reported that they'd had some kind of co-op or internship experience prior to that first job. So whether it's experience or this additional degree, something that distinguishes them from other candidates, I think that's key. And I think we could even, and the discussion's already kind of going there today, is the relevancy of, I would say even appropriateness of looking at degrees. So majors, grade point averages, all those kinds of things. And I think we have to ask ourselves as employers, do they really align with the positions or the expectations of the position? Are they really necessary? And what is it specifically that you're looking for when it comes to those skills and competencies? So a programmer, for example, at the end of the day, it may be that he or she is just an exceptional programmer, and you may not need some of the other skills that you would certainly require from a consultant or something like that. So I think as an organization, you have to be really mindful of that, strategic. And I also think that's going to position you to be really competitive in competing for talent. That's the name of the game here. So that's my take.
Absolutely.
So,
Oh yeah, yes, go ahead.
Can we ask questions?
Of course you can.
Okay.
We'll allow you to ask questions. It's
So
okay.
for those non-traditional students that are going through classes online, let's say, and John might be able to touch on this too, not stepping foot on campus, but what's your strategy and how do you approach them, or how do you reach out to them, or how do you engage with them?
So I think the MBA recruiting world needs to be totally disrupted. And I don't know what that looks like yet, and I will stand next to the next person.
But with her results though, come on.
No, but I mean, I think part of MBA recruiting that's super hard is it's still very regimented and it's very driven and traditional. And I don't even know, as Gen Z gets into MBA school, that's the way they're gonna wanna do things. I would say that out of the folks we hire, and we have a really small program, maybe 25 total hires between first years and second years. I would say 70% come from our core schools, the rest come from ambient. And I think last year we did hire some untraditional 3-year. And then last year I think we also hired one accelerated person. And the reason that person fit was they had launched a program in a country that we were going into and was a resident of that country, and it just was a perfect kind of match.
Well, what's interesting is even the MBA itself, you have to, I think as an employer, ask yourself, what is it about the MBA? Why are we recruiting that, people with that credential? And what's happening, especially nationally and globally, is this increased awareness and use of data analytics. So much so that we're actually seeing degrees popping up now based on data analytics. And some are speculating that it may actually take over the MBA, which also tells me, so what in the MBA specifically, that's the piece that we're looking for in those candidates. So this is me talking, not an ace, but maybe that's what we ought to be looking for when we're sourcing for our candidates. Do they have experience in some kind of data analytics, whether it's an MBA or not?
And I think maybe to add to that, and Don, to your point, I think that the higher education model is at a tipping point right now. It is ripe for disruption, because if you think about it, the majority of kids that are in elementary school right now will hold jobs that don't even exist right now in a few years and when they graduate. And so how do you support that type of educational path when you don't even know what you're educating them for? So I think when you look to non-traditional education models, this is kind of what's leading innovation in higher education is non-4-year degree programs, boot camps and apprenticeships, and President Trump is very much behind advocating for these types of programs because there is a real viable path there, specifically for STEM talent. And so, I think that, my question to the employers in the room is, how do you perceive these programs? How do you embrace the talent that comes out of those programs? And what can we do to really move that to the next level so that you can, put students on this path that is applicable to the talent that you need without having these very stringent requirements of a 4-year program or an MBA, so on and so forth. So I'm curious if anyone in the room has.
Is anybody either tinkering with and/or besides what we've shared so far, any kind of example like that, like boot camps, like hackathons, the list goes on. Not only, yes.
So I've hired students coming out of some of the boot camps to be contractors. But I find that the skills that they have right now are they're technical skills, but they're on the front end. They're mostly on the front end design work. They're not full stack, right? And the level of knowledge that's needed to become a full stack developer is really more a 4-year college degree requirement. And my clients are saying the same thing. A 4-year college student gets a lot more experience and is so much more well-rounded in terms of technology than a person that's gone through a 6, 8, 12-week boot camp. And there's also something to be said about just the ability to learn over a 4-year period and mature in your learning. Whereas if you're coming out of high school and going into a boot camp and then trying to get a job, that maturity level isn't quite there to really function in some of the sophisticated environments that our clients have.
But is that something an employer can pick up on and train to?
Sure,
Potentially, yeah.
I almost feel like maybe this is a biased opinion because full disclosure, my husband's going through, he is full-time data science at Google, but he also is doing a part-time Georgia Tech program. And it's not easy when you have a full-time job to do
Right.
something part-time. Usually the motivation around it is like to improve your capability at your current job. And like you're mentioning, you're able to apply it right away. The question around it was like how, on a tactical level, what does the engagement look like? Like how do you engage with those students without like a physical campus presence? Like how do you reach out to them? Is it directly in conversation with the university or whoever's providing the service, or is it more broad, and are you working with a company that deals directly with multiple companies that have, or schools that have online education?
I've heard of some models where there are these training programs and they're free to the student, and they basically take a percentage of their salary once they get placed within an organization, once they start making $50,000 or more a year. And so I can imagine that there are certain employers that partner directly with those boot camps or training programs, and they likely have a lot of influence over what that curriculum looks like so that it's well suited for their needs. But you know, again, this is all fairly new and emerging, and so I was curious to hear from some people in the room.
I mean, some of this, it's about access, right? So you're talking about populations that are remote because it's online, or they're having to work, so it's after hours. So the career centers and the schools that do this well are cognizant of that. And you've probably done some of these. I've done some info sessions where I have a group like this, but then they're also televising it via Skype to their online students. And then they're also recording it. So those who weren't online that day, they can show it at a later time. So the technology is there, and it's on the schools, I think, and the students basically demand that's in play. But as far as the access, those employers who want to really get into this space and do it well, they've got to get creative. So I've heard of some events being hosted on Saturdays, and they're family friendly. So that works out really well. And it's creating that opportunity for those students. So again, a traditional internship isn't going to work for this group. They don't have time, right? So what could work? Maybe a job shadowing day, maybe a single day or two externship, where they're able to come in, experience what that corporate culture is like with the organization, and get a taste for that job. So it's really being, thinking out of the box. I think we're fortunate as we're going into 2018, the technology's there. We just need to kind of bridge that collectively.
I know that with organizations, this is more broad, but I think it's applicable here as well, where organizations are having more live chat sessions that are for candidates, potential candidates on their career sites, maybe a few times a week, certain blocks of time. Granted, you still got to be able to reach that audience that you're trying to attract to be able to say, come ask us questions about what we're doing in our organization today. But that's something that we're seeing a lot more of, as well as even general Q&A chat bots that are already being utilized in customer service, but also on the recruitment side as well, getting those out there. So technology is going to be a much bigger player out there. But I'm just curious to kind of dovetail on that, is that, to your question and your point, I mean, is the career services channel still something that is going to be viable in this context going forward?
I can speak to that. So we have, what I have found is that the part-time students, like you said, don't have the same opportunities all the time to come to all of these employer events, right? But I also think it depends on what industry you're talking about. I'm recruiting for consulting. Client facing is extremely important. Yes, we know they're not going to come to every event, but they need to come to a few. And we have events that are, in the evening, on the weekends, things like that, to allow those individuals to come meet with us, because that is just still the nature of our business. And we have to have interactions to know whether these are candidates that we feel confident in that consulting client-facing role. But career services, what they have done is they are starting to, when those candidates are entering their third year and they're getting ready for interviewing, that's when they pull them into, they do weekend sessions, casing sessions, and they really start ramp. So we don't meet these candidates until they're going into their final year. Some of them have also, what they've opted to do is quit their job, go for an internship between their second and third year, if they get an internship, then they quit their job and then they finish out their third year as basically a full-time student, like on a regular schedule. So I've just seen some different things. It did not used to be that way, but students are kind of getting creative and career services are becoming more flexible and pulling them in.
I totally agree with that. I think that, and Glenn, you made a really good point about kind of digitalizing some of those experiences, because today you need to meet the students where they are, and that's online and that's on their phone. And so you need to make these experiences really accessible through those channels and consumable through those channels. And so, and Angela and I were talking earlier today that sometimes the career fair environment is a really good second touch. So you kind of have to source and reach out to them and say, hey, I think you're a good fit, make that connection. And by the way, I'm going to be on campus next week and I would love to meet you. And so just taking advantage of those face-to-face opportunities, but maybe tapping them on the shoulder beforehand to make those connections so that it's really productive and you get really good quality conversations out of those opportunities.
And I think career services, they do have a place and a really important role. I think it's going to shift. So I think it will be one on candidate preparation. So, we're sourcing based on experience. So the candidates, in knowing that, I think there's a very coachable opportunity on behalf of the career services to explain to them, look, you need to have these keywords in there or they're never going to find you. What does your online presence look like? And they could go to like a LinkedIn or whatever. I have to tell you, it's disappointing. There's some of these candidates who are seniors, they don't even have photos up on their LinkedIn. It's troubling. I also think with some of these online programs and such, they could be furnishing resume books, things like that to the employer. So I think they have a very viable role. At the end of the day, too, this is still a relationship-driven industry. And, the real wins for us are when we know faculty, we know advisors, and we have those personal relationships, especially if you're brand challenged, like my organization. You hear the word auditor, everybody probably assumes we're IRS or tax. That's not what we do. We're kind of like problem solvers for the legislature. But until I have that opportunity to educate those candidates, they're never going to kind of make that connection. So we need a voice. We need the career services.
So, but what about on the digital side, though? I mean, I know we're kind of talking about this already, but virtual career fairs, for example. I mean, is that something that I know I've heard about it even just a few years ago. Is that something that's being even initiated on or being executed on? Because I agree with you. There's the face time, the relationship time, the in-person time on campus at an in-person career fair. That's really critical, depending on what you're trying to hire for and source for. But what about using virtual career fairs? Is there any success in that, or is that already kind of gone to the wayside?
So it's interesting. I think the first one might have been about 5-6 years ago, and it was really clunky, and we got out of that arena really quickly. But it was last spring. There was an East Coast organization hosted one, and one of my team members participated. So he had to be on call through the day participating in that event. And it's the first time where he reported back, you know what, this was good. This was worthwhile. There were some decent candidates. There was an exchange. Hey, this is second best. First, you always I like your analogy. Career fairs for me still work. Mm-hmm. But it's almost like office hours. That's how I use it. It's less about, really meeting people for the first time, although some of that happens. A lot of it is, again, reinforcing that relationship with the candidate, creating that opportunity. So the virtual career fair, at least the way we're using it, it's that initial lead, the initial connection, and then let's pick up the phone. Let's talk. Let's go from there, or let's meet. Where are you at? Oh, yeah, it's the school that we actually recruit at.
So speaking of picking up the phone, nobody answers their phone anymore, right? Nobody answers their emails anymore. So what are we doing?
Unless they think an offer's coming.
But let me ask you. Well, I know that. But texting is more ubiquitous now, and getting in front of it. I know recruitment is companies are using more and more text-based technologies, options in order to get the word out, get jobs out, and communicate with them What about any of you? Mona, do you have any thoughts on that in regards to texting as it relates to communicating with the candidates?
For sure. I think you are more likely to get a quick response or a response in general if you text them. Candidates are likely to see it right away when you send it. It's a really easy two-way communication channel, and it's not that scary for them to ask questions or communicate in that way. I mean, coming to a career fair in person, I think for the type of candidates you're hiring for, to have that skill to market yourself is really important for the roles that you're hiring for. But when you think about STEM talent, the number one way they want to learn about an opportunity is online, right, or through email. And only 14% of them said that they want to go to career fairs at all. And when you think about the top schools like the Stanfords and the Ivy Leagues, that number dramatically drops. And so I think that we're kind of forced to have to find ways to use those channels. But then again, it's, thinking about how do you source, how do you collect databases of students that have opted in to communicate with you in that way, and how do you build out those avenues so that they're useful and you're aware of them.
You're gonna have to still drive awareness. Yes, question,
So,
comment.
on that, so what are companies using? I hear Piazza and some other platforms, but in terms of network, these databases, what are people using that's working?
So I can speak to EY. We do a lot, all of our brochures are now digital. So we say text this number and you get all of our information right on your smartphone. And it's, you can read through it. It's really cool. So we don't, number one, very eco-friendly and really trying to push information out digitally. The other thing we've done is, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Zoomforth. Zoomforth, okay, it's a tool that we use. It's call it like a mini YouTube channel. So we have different Zoomforth sites. I have one specifically for MBA recruiting that I worked with our marketing team to build, and it's great. Basically, our folks, our hires, will film a 60 to 90-second video on whatever topic they want to talk about, or we give them some ideas. But it's a more personal, here was a great team activity I did on my last engagement. And the culture comes through, and it's them sitting in front of their computer or on their smartphone filming this 90-second video, and they're posted up, and students can get information that way as well. It's not just having to go on campus or go to a career fair and meet with people in person. And so those are just a few ways that we're pushing information out.
There's also there's a startup here in the San Jose area called Text Recruit, which helps you leverage your ATS database, and they get into the, you guys use them?
I do.
Yeah.
Yes.
How would you attest to is it a good platform?
Excellent, yes.
So how do you tell us how, just not to give them a free plug, but I'm just curious. No, but how do you get over the opt-in issue in regards to texting? How does that work then?
I'm part of the application.
It's part of the application process, right? They check a box saying I will.
They have to uncheck.
They uncheck saying I will. Okay, got it.
Do not
So-
want to receive text
Got
messages.
it. Okay.
So, but I've had great success using that tool.
These kids today with their devices and their right.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent.
Angela, can I ask just a follow-up
Sure.
question to that? When you tell them, text this number and you'll get our flyer, how do they find out about that? Text this number, where do they see that?
Right.
Since you said you're not going on campus. If you don't
No, we
go on
are
campus.
going on campus. So
Okay.
that is part of our information sessions. We push it out through clubs, the different clubs that we're partnering with. We push it out through, our flyers. So we find different ways, e-flyers, I should say. Primarily, I would say through the clubs, and then our information sessions, we have a slide up, and they all take a picture of it, and then they text the number, and they get all of their information from us digitally afterwards.
I think some other ideas, obviously you can leverage your digital media kind of channels and create a landing page that opts candidates in that has a really quick short form that says, you're interested in hearing more about roles with our organization, give me your name and phone number, and have them opt in to receive text messages. That's a really good way to start to build up your own internal database. But you could push that messaging through Facebook, digital advertising channels, Instagram.
Yes.
So there's a number of ways that you can very specifically target that audience. to drive them to that action so that you can start to engage with them in that way. And then you can use your text group to have those conversations.
But I do think you have to discriminate. So there's texting's one thing on the one hand, but on the other hand, they don't want you, be a Facebook friend, for example. There's certain platforms they don't want you connecting or space they don't want you in. And then there's data backing that too. So I think you have to still try and figure out what's best and what also aligns with your company, your industry, and your corporate values.
And they can keep their Snapchat. I'm just telling you right now.
Well, and but I think
Not gonna happen for me, so there you
but
go.
I think you have to continue to look at this. So, right, as I make that comment today, 2 years from now, it might be the norm that we are Facebook. Everybody is using it in that way. We're engaging in that way. It's not that you don't advertise that way, but it's a different level of engagement. Because you think about the MySpaces and all these other platforms, and the evolution.
So Mona, just in summary, because we're about out of time real quick, what do you recommend? What would be the first consideration of when you're targeting non-traditional students? What do you recommend everybody? Put you on the spot.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think you have to define your persona, what that non-traditional student looks like, create that, kind of who am I targeting, what are their attributes, and then find different ways in which you can go after that audience, but then also think about how you can connect with them. What is it that makes them tick? What is it that makes them inspired about what you do? So if you're going after female engineers, reach out to them and say, hey, I'd love to introduce you to our lady engineering team, or I'd like to, so find something that you can do that connects, that resonates, to get them excited about that opportunity. But I think it's understanding who you're looking to target, and then you can find ways.
And understanding how best to leverage digital and in person as well, right? Angela, anything you want to add on?
Great point about knowing and defining who that non-traditional student is for you and your company. For us, again, like I mentioned, the degree is still important. So, but what we have done is we've gone more of a shared service center model approach for some of our opportunities at EY. So these are more of support positions and administrative roles where we're not, people no longer have an executive assistant or an admin assistant. These are roles that are being fulfilled by our shared services center. And those are roles that we're hiring more of the non-traditional type candidates, and they have opportunities then to transition into other careers at EY. So it's an opportunity for them to come in. But for us, I think, the non-traditional student in my world is going to be very different than,
Right.
When somebody hiring maybe in a different industry.
Right, but I like your points about the examples of the part-time MBA students.
Yeah.
And the success you've had there too.
Right.
Glenn, what about you? Any last thought?
Yeah, I would say as employers, look at those core competencies that basically support your existing positions and challenge those. Make sure that are they actually relevant and are they necessary or are they arbitrary? And even a 4-year degree, based on whose expectation. If your customer still expects it, that's one thing. But if you're doing it internally just because that's the way we've always done it, I would look really closely at that, knowing that, gosh, a lot of these non-traditional students are 2-year programs. You might be able to get some of the best talent out of those 2-year programs, hire them, close that competency gap while they're with you through rotation programs. And I liked your point about the maturity, because I know some of the sidebars I've had about this, the maturity isn't always there. Let them grow up in your organization and your culture, and you might actually retain them for more than 2 years.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much to the panel. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Kevin.
So don't everybody pack up yet. I have a few closing words. And of course for our speaker and our panelists before you walk away.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
So I have I'm fine. I had this vision of weaving together all these notes, these chicken scratch notes that I took during the day of my of my learning moments, and I wanted to like weave it into this beautiful story and tell you a story of, you know, what you can take with you. But I don't know how to do that. It was just a bunch of really good thoughts, and they don't always come together. So it doesn't just weave together so beautifully. But I still wanted to share some of my takeaways. I'm guessing all of you have at least a couple things that you're taking away with you. For me, in the beginning of our day, we talked a lot about pipeline, and that's really sticking with me. John, your comment stuck with me a lot about, because we talk so much, it's kind of we like to say that the pipeline is not a problem, it's just you're not looking in the right spots. So everybody get creative. And what I heard Don say was, nope, pipeline is the problem. We don't have enough people in STEM, going into STEM fields. And so what our job is to, as you said, Don, widen the funnel. Figure out a way to widen the funnel, because it's not growing on its own right now. What was it, 3%? Something like that. So that's something that I'm taking home. We didn't get into this so much into the panel, but I had another conversation with Cindy Loggins at eBay about authenticity. And I wish we had another, 45 minutes to really talk about retention of these candidates that we've been discussing today. But she really was, what matters to her a lot, and I'm sure to most of you, is your authentic culture to retain once you get, your diverse candidates, your non-traditional candidates, once you hire those women. How do you retain them? How do you stop that revolving door? And so anyone could, follow up with Cindy with her thoughts. She had some really good things to say about authentic culture.
The inclusion piece.
The inclusion piece, right? Make people feel welcome to bring their whole selves to work. I really liked Alan's comment again. I think I said this earlier about our obsession with finding the diamond in the rough, finding the needle in the haystack. That if we hire this person, then we can drive growth. But when you're hiring at scale, especially when you have hundreds or even thousands of interns and entry-level positions to fill, the question really should be, to Alan's point, who can do the job well? And then it begs the question, who can you train and upskill to fill your leadership positions? I thought that was a very good point. There were so many good points. 3/4 of undergrads are non-traditional. I didn't know that. That's amazing. And so, of course, you have to question, well, what is my pool? And who are we fishing in the right pond? And again, did Cindy leave? We talked earlier at lunch about the not only are you fishing in a small pond because there aren't very many fish, but the water there's not very much water. So non-traditional students, the creativity that is required to find those, and engage with your non-traditional candidates, so texting, and the mini YouTube, I forget the name of the platform, something to look up. Yes. Zoom point, yes. Those are the things that are sitting with me right now, and I just want to leave you with one note. We want to be able to facilitate the continuation of this conversation that we had today. So I plan to share everybody's names and organizations and email addresses, not heads or nodding. If you do not want me to share that, please tell me by next Friday. Just shoot me a note and say, take me off the list. So by next week, or after next Friday, then everyone will get that list, because collaboration and hearing best practices is good for all of us. And Kevin, you said you wanted to share your slides, so I can do that.
No, happy to do it, sure.
Yeah.
Because there's some data points I didn't get to, so.
Yeah, exactly, so I can share.
Including the one with you and your wife?
Including the Star Wars picture if you want it.
I'm not taking it out.
You can delete it if that's okay, no love lost.
Mark, okay, thank you. Great. And John, yes, too.
Yes.
Super. Thank you to all of our speakers.
Star Wars picture.
I want your Star Wars picture, yeah.
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you to the Intuit team for hosting this.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Very gracious. I know you guys worked hard. Thank you to Kevin for being with us. Thank you to Mark for co-organizing with us. And all the panelists for making their way here. I thought it was a really great day. And I think the last thing I'll say is, if you ever catch yourself saying, that's the way we've always done it, stop yourself. you remember today. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Anna.
Even